Imagine a world without wires, a world where data flows invisibly, connecting everything from the deep reaches of space right down to the smart devices in your pocket. But what if that invisible connection suddenly dropped? Or even worse, what if it was intercepted? What if the very air around us became, well, a battleground for your most critical business data?
It's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it's not far off. From the cloud to your coffee maker, I mean, everything is connected these days. And it all starts with data communications. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating, definitely complex, and absolutely crucial world of wireless networking.
Yeah, and this deep dive is really custom tailored for you, especially if you're maybe navigating the currents of BCIS 1347 data communications, or even if you just have that insatiable curiosity about how our connected world truly works. We're going to pull back the curtain on wireless. We'll explore the fundamental technologies, their strategic managerial issues, and the future impact these invisible forces have on business and, well, beyond. Okay, but before we plunge deeper, could you do us a quick favor? Hit that like button, subscribe to the deep dive, and maybe share this with anyone who needs that shortcut to being truly well-informed. You really won't want to miss our insider tips. They can help position you for a bright future in your chosen career. And remember, all the extra resources we mentioned, they're waiting for you in the description below.
Right. And our mission today, really, is to equip you with a nuanced understanding of wireless networking. Not just the what, but the why, and, importantly, how it impacts your future as a business leader. We'll aim to translate these complex concepts into practical insights, drawing from, advanced theories in wireless communication, but connecting them directly to real-world applications and the strategic decisions you'll actually face, whether at the Dr. Sam Pack College of Business or elsewhere.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The whole invisible nature of wireless. It does make it seem both magical and, honestly, a bit daunting sometimes. What are we actually dealing with when we talk about sending data through the air? And, how did we even get here?
That's the perfect place to start, because the story of wireless, it's one of continuous, often, frankly, breathtaking innovation. It all kicked off over a century ago, back in 1897. Guglielmo Marconi, he did these groundbreaking demonstrations of wireless telegraphy. And this wasn't just, a small step. It was a fundamental leap.
Right, not just improving wires, but getting rid of them entirely for certain things.
Exactly. Suddenly, communication wasn't tethered by physical wires. Just think about the impact of that, transmitting information across huge distances entirely through the air. And by 1901, just a few years later, Marconi had achieved transatlantic radio reception. That must have felt like pure science fiction back then.
Absolutely.
And it's a dynamic, ongoing evaluation. The decision between wireless and wired, it isn't about one being inherently superior. It's about which one offers the optimal blend, of cost, performance, and flexibility for a specific business context at a specific time. Think about some historical examples. Early television, transmitted wirelessly over the air.
Right, rabbit ears on the TV set.
Exactly. But then cable infrastructure became widespread, and lots of consumers shifted to cable TV. It offered more channels, often a more stable signal, right? Similarly, the backbone of long-distance phone networks once relied heavily on microwave radio links, basically wireless.
High-capacity wireless links, yeah.
But today, optical fiber has largely superseded those for sheer bandwidth and speed. But then, the pendulum swings back. Think about cellular technology. It's significantly replacing traditional wired phones, especially in developing regions where laying physical cables is just, prohibitively expensive or impractical.
So the context really matters.
Immensely. For you as a business student, this isn't just some technical detail. This constant flux, it directly relates to those alternatives available in hardware, software, and transmission facilities that you'll have to evaluate. And it shapes the selection and implementation of communication solutions you'll be tasked with in your career. Your ability to weigh these trade-offs, to make those informed strategic decisions, that's going to be a significant competitive advantage. Okay, and this leads us to a really fundamental point. Why is wireless inherently different? And frankly, so much more complex than just plugging in a cable. What's actually happening in that invisible space between the antennas?
That's where the real challenge, and honestly, the real magic lies. Unlike a wired channel, which is, a stable, controlled pipe for data, the wireless channel is inherently dynamic. It's unpredictable.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to send a message through a perfectly built, unmoving pipe.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, seems easy enough.
Now, compare that to trying to shout that same message across a crowded, echoing room where people are constantly moving, shouting back, changing the acoustics just by being there.
Okay, much harder.
Much harder.
Yeah.
The room itself, the wireless channel, is constantly shifting. This fundamental difference means designing wireless systems isn't about achieving perfect control. It's about building resilience, building intelligence into the system to cope with constant change. We can't assume a steady state. We have to build systems that can adapt to rapid changes in signal strength, direction, interference, all of it. And that requires really clever engineering solutions to ensure reliability. It's why wireless can sometimes feel amazing and other times just, well, infuriating when it drops.
So we're sending data through this invisible, often chaotic space. How do we even organize who gets to use what part of this invisible highway? I'm guessing someone like the FCC you hear about has to police this. Right, otherwise it'd just be noise.
You're absolutely right. It all comes down to electromagnetic waves. Think of them as ripples in an invisible field. They don't need a physical medium like a wire to travel. These waves are defined by their frequency, how fast they oscillate, and their wavelength, the physical distance between the peaks of the waves. And yeah, without regulation, if everyone transmitted on the same frequencies, massive interference. Communication would be impossible. Just noise, like you said.
Chaos.
Total chaos. That's why organizations like the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC here in the USA, play such a critical role. They are essentially the traffic cops of the airwaves. They allocate specific frequency bands, specific lanes on that highway for different purposes. Cellular communication, Wi-Fi, radio broadcasts, satellite links, they all have their designated frequencies.
And when we talk about those specific lanes, I know the source material mentioned ones for cellular here in the US, things like around 0.9 gigahertz, 1.9 gigahertz, and 5.8 gigahertz. Why those particular frequencies? And what are the practical implications of something like wavelength here?
Right, those specific bands, 0.9 gigahertz, 1.9 gigahertz, 5.8 gigahertz, they form the invisible infrastructure for our mobile world. They aren't arbitrary numbers. They're carefully allocated segments of that electromagnetic spectrum. Now, wavelength. How long the wave physically is. It's basically determined by how fast it travels the speed of light, which is constant, and how often it oscillates, its frequency. Higher frequency means shorter wavelength. In these cellular bands, the wavelengths are typically fractions of a meter. At 0.9 gigahertz, it's around 33 centimeters, maybe a bit over a foot. At 5.8 gigahertz, it's much shorter, roughly 5 centimeters, like a couple of inches.
Okay, so quite small, physically.
Exactly. And this might seem like just a technical detail, but it has profound business and operational implications. Because these wavelengths are so small, the signals interact with, well, almost everything around you. Buildings, hills, trees, cars, even people walking by. They all reflect, scatter, or block these waves.
So everything becomes an obstacle or a reflector.
Pretty much. Which means to accurately predict exactly how a signal will behave, you'd theoretically need to know the precise location, size, and material of every single object in the environment with sub-meter accuracy.
Which is impossible in the real world, especially with things moving.
Exactly. It's practically impossible in a dynamic mobile environment. So the key managerial takeaway here, you can't rely on perfect prediction for wireless signal strength. The environment itself is an active participant. This forces engineers and network planners to rely on sophisticated approximations, statistical models, rather than trying to do precise physical calculations for every user. And understanding this is foundational for you to, as the course describes, identify telecommunications and data communications technology fundamentals of transmission for analog, digital, and multiplex signals in the electronic spectrum. It means recognizing the inherent unpredictability you're building your business communications on.
Okay, so it's not just about what frequency you're on, but how that signal constantly bounces around and interacts with a moving, changing world. It sounds like the wireless channel itself is this dynamic, unpredictable entity we have to grapple with.
Exactly. When we talk about the wireless channel, we're not just referring to empty space between antennas. We're talking about a really complex, dynamic environment where the transmitted signal interacts with countless objects. These interactions cause the signal to travel along multiple paths to get from the transmitter to the receiver. This phenomenon is called multipath. Think of it like shouting at a canyon. Your voice travels directly to the listener, sure.
The main sound.
Right. But it also bounces off the canyon walls, the ground, maybe some rocks. Each bounce arrives at the listener's ear at a slightly different time, from a slightly different direction, maybe a bit fainter, creating echoes.
Lots of echoes. Okay.
And in wireless, each of these reflected or scattered paths has its own delay, its own attenuation, how much weaker it gets, and its own phase shift, kind of like how the wave is rotated. The challenge is that the combined effect of all these paths at the receiver changes constantly. As your phone moves even a little bit, as a car drives by, or even just as people walk around, the canyon walls are effectively shifting. This makes the wireless channel what we call a linear time-varying system. Linear because the total signal is the sum of these paths, and time-varying because those path characteristics are in constant flux.
So businesses need to understand that their wireless signals aren't just this clean, direct stream. They're more like a symphony of echoes, some helpful, some destructive.
That's a great analogy, a constantly changing symphony of echoes. This fundamental complexity means you need really robust systems capable of dealing with this constant interference and change. It impacts your choices in network hardware and software, in everything. It's why designing reliable wireless systems is so much more intricate than just running a cable. What's fascinating here is that the very air that enables wireless also presents its greatest challenges. This channel isn't just open space, it's a dynamic, often chaotic environment. Indeed, it's definitely a double-edged sword. The freedom of wireless, not being tied down, it comes at the cost of a far less predictable transmission medium than a nice, stable cable. And within this dynamic environment, one of the most significant challenges we face is fading. Fading basically describes the fluctuation, sometimes wild fluctuation, in the signal strength received at your antenna. We typically categorize fading into two main types: large scale and small scale.
Okay, large scale and small scale, what's the difference?
So large-scale fading is more relevant for the big picture planning, like figuring out where to actually place cell towers across a city or region. It deals with the average power decay as the signal travels over distance. And interestingly, this decay can be much faster in the real world than simple physics might predict, mainly because of major obstacles like big buildings or hills casting shadows that block the signal. Think of a mountain blocking a radio signal. When you're planning a new cellular network, understanding large-scale fading helps you decide how many cell sites you need and where to put them to ensure basic coverage over a wide area.
Got it. So that's the macro view. What about small scale?
Small-scale multipath fading is really the primary focus when we're designing reliable and efficient communication systems for individual users on the move. This is caused by those electromagnetic waves traveling multiple paths, bouncing off buildings, scattering off trees, bending around corners, and then interfering with each other when they arrive at the receiver antenna. This interference can be constructive, meaning the waves add up and make the signal temporarily stronger.
Like a lucky break.
Sort of. But it can also be destructive, where the waves cancel each other out, causing a deep fade. And that's where the signal can virtually disappear for a moment. Designing robust systems means effectively combating these rapid, unpredictable fluctuations on a moment-to-moment basis. For you as a manager, knowing this means understanding why a connection might suddenly drop, even if you haven't moved far, and what kind of technologies are needed to make it reliable despite this.
Ever noticed how a siren's pitch changes as an ambulance passes you? That's the Doppler effect, right? It sounds like this same principle applies to our data too, and tells us something about how quickly the wireless channel is changing.
That siren analogy is perfect. It's exactly the same principle, Doppler shift. When your phone, or maybe a connected car, is moving relative to the cell tower, the frequency of the received radio waves appears to shift. If you're moving towards the tower, the frequency seems a tiny bit higher. Moving away, it seems a tiny bit lower. The formula is actually quite simple. The shift is related to your velocity and the carrier frequency. Now, in a multipath environment, remember all those echoes arriving from different directions. Each path might experience a slightly different Doppler shift because the angle of arrival is different relative to your motion.
Ah, so multiple shifts happening at once.
Exactly. And the difference or spread between these multiple Doppler shifts is called Doppler spread. It's a crucial parameter because it tells us how rapidly the channel's characteristics, especially its phase, are changing. A high Doppler spread means your channel is changing very, very quickly.
Okay, so Doppler tells us about the speed of change. What about those echoes arriving at different times?
That relates to delay spread. This is basically the difference in arrival times between the earliest significant signal path and the latest significant signal path. Like hearing the first echo versus the last echo of your shout in the canyon. If the delay spread is large compared to the duration of your data symbols, parts of one symbol can overlap and interfere with the next symbol. This causes inter-symbol interference, basically smearing the data together.
Which sounds bad for clarity.
It is. It also means that different frequencies within your transmitted signal are affected differently by the fading. Some frequencies might be strong while others are weak. This is called frequency selective fading. Then there's coherence time. This is roughly the duration over which the channel response remains relatively stable, essentially constant, before it changes significantly. It's inversely related to Doppler spread. Fast changes mean short coherence time.
So how does this all fit together? Fast fading, slow fading.
Right. If your data transmission or a block of coded data, is very short compared to the coherence time. We call it slow fading. The channel is pretty much constant during your transmission block. But if your transmission takes longer than the coherence time, the channel changes multiple times during that transmission. That's fast fading. The system experiences rapid and independent channel variations. For example, the source notes mention values like moving at 64 kilometers or at 1 gigahertz, leading to a coherence time of about 2.5 milliseconds. If your system needs data delivered faster than that, it's dealing with slow fading relative to that requirement. If it's slower, it's fast fading. These physical realities are fundamental for you to, again quoting the course outcomes, explain the makeup of the various transmission media and their associated characteristics. As a business leader, understanding these dynamics helps you appreciate why reliable mobile communication is so challenging and why investment in advanced tech is necessary, especially for users on the move. Now, given the sheer complexity, imagine trying to calculate the exact electromagnetic field equations for every mobile user on the fly.
It's practically impossible. You need to know every building, every tree, every moving car.
Down to the centimeter, right?
Pretty much. So because we can't predict the exact path of every wave, we rely heavily on probabilistic models to design wireless systems. We can't get perfect predictions, but we can use statistics to describe how the signal is likely to behave. These models, while not exact, provide invaluable sort of order of magnitude guidance for system design and predicting performance.
Okay, so what are some common models we use?
One of the most common is Rayleigh fading. This model typically applies when there's no direct line of sight path between the transmitter and receiver. The signal reaches you entirely via many reflected and scattered paths, none of which is dominant. Think of being deep inside a large office building, far from windows with lots of walls and furniture. The signal you receive is a complex jumble of reflections. The math shows the signal strength follows a specific statistical distribution, the Rayleigh distribution.
And what if there is a direct path?
That's where Rishon feeding comes in. This is a more robust model used when there is a dominant, strong specular path, usually the line of sight path, in addition to all the scattered paths. Rishon fading is characterized by something called the K factor. The K factor is basically the ratio of the power in that dominant direct path to the total power in all the scattered paths. A large K factor means the direct path is very strong and the channel behaves more predictably, closer to a non-fading channel. This might be like being in an open field with a clear view of the cell tower, but maybe some distant trees causing a few reflections.
So understanding these models helps businesses how? It's not like managers need to do the math.
No, absolutely not about the math. It's about the implications for predictability and reliability. Rayleigh fading, common in dense urban canyons or indoors, tells you the signal is inherently more volatile. You're always gambling on those bounces. This means you likely need more robust, perhaps more expensive, technology, like diversity techniques we'll discuss, to ensure reliable communication. Region fading, maybe in a suburb or open area, suggests a clearer shot. The signal is more stable, so perhaps simpler, less costly technology might suffice for the same level of reliability. The core insight for you is, your operating environment directly dictates your technology choices, your expected reliability, and potentially your costs. This directly ties into the skill of formulating a risk assessment and developing an appropriate security strategy. Context. You can't assess the risk to your wireless communications if you don't understand how the environment fundamentally impacts the signal behavior.
Okay, so the airwaves are this unpredictable, constantly changing environment prone to fading. If that's the case, how do we actually get our data through reliably? How do we conquer these constant fading challenges to make sure our messages actually reach their destination intact?
This is really where the ingenuity of wireless communication engineering shines. The fundamental problem, as we've seen, with relying on just a single signal path, is that it's highly vulnerable to those deep fades. When the signal strength for that one path drops significantly, which happens frequently and unpredictably, your communication can just fail entirely. It's like having only one road to your destination, and if there's suddenly a massive traffic jam or an accident blocking it, you're stuck.
Makes sense. You need alternatives.
Exactly. So, this raises the crucial question. How do we ensure our data gets through even when the signal strength is fluctuating wildly? The most powerful answer often lies in diversity. The core idea of diversity is elegantly simple. Send the same information, or components of it, through multiple independently fading paths. The magic happens because the probability of all these independent paths experiencing a deep fade at the exact same time is much, much lower than any single path fading.
So you're spreading the risk. basically.
Precisely. You're
Yeah.
spreading the risk across different dimensions. As long as at least one of those paths is reasonably strong, reliable communication is possible. This dramatically improves performance. It reduces the chance of errors far more effectively than just trying to blast more power through a single fading path.
Okay, so how do we create these multiple independent paths? What are the main types of diversity?
There are several clever ways engineers achieve this. First, there's time diversity. This involves transmitting the same piece of information at different points in time. If you space these transmissions far enough apart, beyond the channel's coherence time, or if you interleave bits from different messages, you can ensure that each transmission experiences an independently faded version of the channel. The simplest form is just repetition saying something twice. Second is frequency diversity. Here you spread the signal energy over different frequency components, or transmit the same info on different carrier frequencies simultaneously. Techniques like orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, or OFDM, which we'll touch on, inherently provide frequency diversity because they use many narrow subcarriers. If one subcarrier is faded, others might be fine. And third, there's space diversity, often called antenna diversity. This is perhaps the most intuitive one. By using multiple antennas, physically separated, either at the transmitter or at the receiver, or both, we exploit the fact that signals arriving at or departing from different locations will travel along slightly different paths and thus experience independent fading. Think of having two ears. If one is muffled, the other might still hear clearly.
Multiple antennas seem pretty common now on routers and phones.
They are. It's a very effective technique. Now, just receiving these multiple copies isn't enough. You need to combine them intelligently at the receiver. A common technique is coherent combining, sometimes called maximal ratio combining, MRC. The receiver estimates the quality, strength, and phase of the signal from each diversity path or antenna. It then weights each signal based on its quality, giving more importance to stronger signals, and adjusts their phases so they add up constructively before summing them. This sophisticated process maximizes the overall signal quality, giving you both a power boost called array gain and that crucial reliability improvement, diversity gain.
And you mentioned transmitting from multiple antennas, too. I know space-time coding, especially something like the Alamode scheme, gets talked about. That sounds like a really clever way to get transmit diversity without just repeating yourself. How does that help businesses get data through reliably?
It truly is a remarkable advancement. The Alamode scheme is a brilliant example of transmit diversity, specifically designed for systems with 2 transmit antennas and 1 receive antenna, a 2x1 meso system, multiple input, single output. Instead of just repeating symbols, which wastes variable bandwidth, Alamode coding intelligently encodes 2 data symbols across the 2 transmit antennas over 2 consecutive time slots. It does this in a very specific mathematical way that maintains orthogonality. The genius part is that the single receive antenna can then process the received signals from those 2 time slots and, through simple linear processing, perfectly separate the 2 original symbols as if they had traveled through 2 independent non-interfering channels.
Wow, okay, so it creates 2 virtual pipes from 2 antennas to 1.
Effectively, yes. It achieves what we call a diversity gain of 2, meaning the probability of error decreases much faster as the signal strength increases compared to a single antenna system. The advantages for businesses relying on wireless are clear. It significantly improves error performance, making wireless connections far more reliable, especially in those challenging fading environments we discussed. Crucially, it achieves this while being spectrally efficient. It doesn't waste bandwidth by simply repeating data. It sends 2 symbols in the time it might normally take to send one reliably. And it's much more power efficient for achieving that reliability compared to basic repetition coding. This kind of innovative approach directly relates to a key skill outcome for your course: selecting appropriate wireless networking components and constructing a wireless design. Understanding schemes like Alamode's allows you, as a future designer or manager, to build more robust and efficient wireless networks that meet specific performance and reliability targets for your business needs. Now, if we connect all this back to the bigger picture, think about cellular networks. They are fundamentally about managing these complex, fading airwaves for a vast number of users simultaneously, all sharing the same space. This is where the concepts of multiple access and interference management become absolutely paramount. At its core, a cellular network, as we know, consists of a huge number of wireless subscribers. That's you with your phones, tablets, connected devices, communicating with a network of fixed base stations. These base stations are strategically arranged geographically in areas we call cells, often visualized as those hexagonal shapes you see in diagrams, to provide continuous coverage as you move around.
Right, the hexagonal grid. Makes sense for planning coverage.
Exactly. And within this architecture, two key issues dominate the design and operation. First, multiple access. This answers the question: how do all the users within the same cell share the available resources, the limited time, frequency bands, and spatial dimensions without constantly interfering with each other? How do multiple people talk to the same tower at once? Second, interference management. This deals with the unavoidable interference caused by signals spilling over from nearby cells using the same frequencies. How do we serve users effectively in our cell without excessively disrupting service in the adjacent cell, and vice versa? And a crucial aspect for a seamless user experience, something we often take for granted, is handoff or handover. This is the process where your mobile device, as you move from one cell's coverage area into another's, automatically and smoothly switches its communication link from the first base station to the second, ideally without you even noticing. No dropped call, no interrupted data stream. Understanding these basic architectural principles isn't just theoretical. It's essential for anyone involved in troubleshooting network performance issues or making strategic decisions about network deployment and upgrades. It links directly to identifying architecture of networks to facilitate troubleshooting techniques.
Okay, so how do these multiple access strategies actually work in practice? Let's maybe start with the older approach, what are called narrowband cellular systems, like the GSM standard that was common for a long time. How did they handle sharing?
Right, in those earlier narrowband systems, like GSM, Global System for Mobile Communications, the design philosophy was relatively straightforward. Avoid interference by strict separation. Give users separate, non-overlapping slices of time and frequency. They typically use frequency division duplex, FDD, meaning separate, dedicated frequency bands were used for the uplink, you talking to the tower, and the downlink, the tower talking to you. Then the available bandwidth within each of those bands was divided into many narrow frequency chunks or channels. And within each narrow channel, time was divided into repeating slots, time division multiple access or TDMA. So if you were on a call, you were assigned a specific time slot on a specific narrow frequency channel for the duration. No one else in your cell could use that exact slot on that exact frequency at the same time.
Very regimented, like assigned seating times at a restaurant.
That's a good way to put it. This approach is effective at minimizing interference within the cell. It simplifies the network design in some ways. However, the big downside is often inefficient use of the precious spectrum. Because of these rigid pre-assigned allocations, a lot of the time slots and frequency channels might actually go unused in certain areas or during off-peak times. This leads to lower overall system capacity compared to more dynamic, modern techniques.
Okay, so that was narrowband. Then came wideband cellular systems, with CDMA being a major player, particularly in 3G. This seems like a completely different philosophy for sharing the airwaves. What was so revolutionary about CDMA?
CDMA, or Code Division Multiple Access, was indeed a paradigm shift in how cellular networks manage spectrum. Its absolute core principle is universal frequency reuse. This means that all users, not just within a single cell, but across all adjacent cells in the network, share the entire available wideband frequency spectrum simultaneously.
Whoa, okay, so instead of separate lanes, everyone's driving on the entire highway at the same time. How does that not just create total chaos?
It sounds chaotic, but CDMA uses some very clever mathematical tricks based on spread spectrum principles to make it work. Here's the gist. First, each user's data signal is multiplied by a unique pseudo-random digital code, a spreading code, that spreads the signal energy across the entire wide frequency band. To the receiver tuned to a specific code, other user signals using different codes just look like low-level background noise, not distinct interference. Second, CDMA relies critically on very tight power control. This is essential to overcome the near-far problem. Without it, a user close to the base station transmitting strongly would completely drown out the much weaker signal from a user far away. The system constantly adjusts each user's transmit power so that all signals arrive at the base station with roughly the same minimum necessary power level. Third, because everyone shares the same frequency, interference comes from everywhere, both inside and outside the cell. CDMA design relies on averaging this interference from many geographically distributed users. This averaging makes the overall interference level more predictable and manageable.
Okay, so spread the signal, control the power, average the interference. What were the benefits of this approach?
The benefits were significant, which is why it was key for 3G. Universal frequency reuse generally leads to more efficient overall use of the spectrum compared to rigid frequency planning. It increased system capacity, especially for bursty data traffic, like web browsing, because resources could be allocated more dynamically. This is called statistical multiplexing gain. CDMA enabled soft handoff. This is a form of macro diversity where, as you move between cells, your phone can actually communicate with multiple base stations simultaneously during the transition zone. This makes handoffs much smoother and dramatically enhances reliability near cell edges, reducing dropped calls. These aspects are really crucial for you as students to understand when you identify appropriate broadband access solutions to include cell-based media. CDMA represented a major evolution in how we delivered mobile broadband.
Now moving forward again, what about OFDM, orthogonal frequency division multiplexing? This is the basis for Wi-Fi, 4G, LTE, 5G. It sounds like it tries to combine the best aspects of both narrowband and wideband approaches.
That's precisely the goal. OFDM aims to get the benefits of orthogonality within a cell, like narrowband TD-MAFDMA, where user signals ideally don't interfere with each other in the same cell, while also enabling aggressive frequency reuse across cells, more like CDMA's universal reuse, through sophisticated interference management techniques. Here's the high-level concept. OFDM takes a wide, potentially frequency-selective channel, remember, where different frequencies fade differently due to multipath, and cleverly divides it into a large number of closely spaced, narrow subcarriers. Each of these narrow subcarriers is designed to be orthogonal to the others, meaning they don't interfere with each other mathematically. And crucially, each one experiences relatively flat fading. So instead of dealing with one complex wide channel, the system deals with many simple, narrow, flat fading channels in parallel.
Breaking a complex problem into many simpler ones.
Exactly. It converts that difficult frequency selective fading problem into a much more manageable flat fading problem on each subcarrier. This makes OFDM highly robust against the smearing effects of multipath delay spread. Now, for business students, understanding the differences between, say, CDMA and OFDM is key. They represent competing and sometimes complementary technological approaches. As a manager, you need to grasp their trade-offs. Spectral efficiency. How many bits per second can you push through a given amount of hertz? Power control. How stringent does the power control need to be? CDMA needs very tight control. OFDM is generally less sensitive. Interference characteristics. How does interference from other users or cells manifest, and how is it managed? Implementation complexity. How complex and costly are the transmitters and receivers? These insights are vital when you're involved in designing and implementing communication solutions. For instance, in a very dense urban environment with lots of users and complex multipath, the high spectral efficiency and adaptability of OFDM used in 4G, 5G are often preferred today.
So ultimately, all these different techniques, diversity, CDMA, OFDM, they're all striving to push against the fundamental limits of how much data we can reliably cram through the airwaves. This brings us nicely to the concept of channel capacity, doesn't it? What's the absolute theoretical limit?
Indeed. The concept of Shannon capacity, named after the brilliant Claude Shannon, is the theoretical North Star for all communication system design. It defines the absolute maximum rate at which information can be transmitted reliably, meaning with an arbitrarily low probability of error over a communication channel, given a certain bandwidth and signal-to-noise ratio, SNR. It's typically measured in bits per second per hertz, bits SSA. The famous formula for an additive white Gaussian noise, a WGN channel, is C, I'll use B log 2, 1 plus SNR, where B is bandwidth. This isn't just some abstract engineering formula. It sets the fundamental physical limit for any communication system, wired or wireless. It provides a benchmark against which we measure the efficiency of all our real-world designs. It basically answers the question, how much data can you possibly squeeze through this invisible pipe, given its width, bandwidth, and how noisy it is, SNR?
Okay, so there's a hard limit based on physics. How does capacity behave differently depending on the conditions, like high noise versus low noise?
That's a critical distinction. Shannon's formula reveals two key operating regimes. In a bandwidth-limited regime, which typically occurs at high SNR, when your signal is much stronger than the noise, capacity increases only logarithmically with power, or SNR. Doubling your power gives you only a small, fixed increase in capacity. Here, throwing more power at the problem yields diminishing returns. Your focus should be on finding more bandwidth, or using the existing bandwidth more cleverly, like with the MIMO, which we'll get to. In a power-limited regime, at low SNR, when the noise is strong relative to your signal, capacity increases almost linearly with power, or SNR. Here, every little bit of extra power gives you a significant, almost proportional boost in data rate. So in these challenging low SNR situations, like at the edge of a cell, increasing transmit power is a very effective strategy, if possible.
Makes sense. More power helps more when you're struggling against noise. Now, how does this apply to the fading channels we've been talking about? Does fading change the capacity picture?
It absolutely does, and in very interesting ways. The impact depends heavily on how fast the channel is fading relative to our transmission.
Consider a slow fading channel, where the channel gain, signal strength, is pretty much constant over an entire block of transmitted data. Here, if you happen to transmit when the channel is in deep fade, your entire block might be lost, regardless of how sophisticated your error-correcting code is. Coding cannot average out the fade in this case. This leads to the concept of outage probability, the probability that the instantaneous channel capacity drops below the rate you're trying to transmit at. Capacity becomes a random variable itself. Now contrast that with a fast fading channel, where the channel gain varies rapidly and independently from one symbol or a small group of symbols to the next within a transmission block. Here, coding can be incredibly effective. By spreading the information across time, using interleaving, and using powerful codes, the system can effectively average out the channel fluctuations. The receiver essentially sees the average channel condition over the block, which leads to a higher, more stable average capacity. This allows for techniques like adaptive modulation and coding, where the system opportunistically uses higher data rates when the channel is momentarily good.
Ah, so fast fading can actually be exploited by smart systems.
Yes, in a sense. Fast fading allows the system to average the channel conditions over time through coding, achieving a capacity related to the average SNR. Slow fading forces you to deal with the possibility of the channel being unusable for periods, leading to outage. A good example mentioned in the sources is the IS-8506, also known as CDMA 2001 by EVD Duopo downlink. It used a TDMA-based rate control system. Instead of fixing the power and rate, it adapted the transmission rate very quickly based on the current channel conditions reported by the user, aiming to always transmit at the highest possible rate the channel could support at that instant. This is a form of exploiting channel variations. For you, as business students, understanding the basics of channel capacity is paramount. It informs crucial strategic decisions about infrastructure investment. Is your business better off investing in technologies that increase bandwidth, or ones that improve SNR, or ones that combat fading more effectively? It allows you to set realistic expectations and performance guarantees, like service level agreements, for your wireless services. And ultimately, it dictates the fundamental scalability of your wireless deployments. These are all critical managerial issues in data and voice communications. If you're planning a network to support thousands or millions of users, or promising certain data speeds, you absolutely must have a grasp of these underlying capacity limits.
Okay, this is where the deep dive truly earns its name, I think. We've covered the fundamentals, the challenges, the core techniques. Now, let's get into how researchers and innovators are pushing the boundaries even further. How are we squeezing even more performance out of these crowded airwaves? It sounds like it's about getting much smarter, much more dynamic with how we use the air itself.
Exactly. We're moving beyond just coping with the channel to actively exploiting its characteristics, especially in multi-user scenarios. This brings us to some really exciting recent developments, particularly around multi-user diversity. This is one of the most powerful concepts to emerge in modern wireless. Think about a typical cell with many users. Because their locations and environments are different, their fading channels fluctuate independently. At any given instant, it's highly probable that some user, just by chance, will be experiencing an exceptionally strong channel condition. Maybe they just hit a sweet spot with constructive interference. Multi-user diversity is about exploiting this statistical variation. Instead of trying to serve everyone fairly in every single time slot, which might mean everyone gets mediocre service when their channels are average or core, the system identifies and preferentially schedules the user who currently has the best channel condition at that moment.
So you're basically listening for who has the clearest shout right now and letting them talk.
That's a perfect analogy. You dynamically allocate the resources to the user who can make the best use of them right now. The benefits are quite substantial. The overall system throughput, the sum capacity across all users, can increase significantly, often logarithmically, with the number of users in the cell. It's almost like getting a free power gain because the system is always picking the strongest possible channel to transmit over without actually increasing the total transmit power. This directly touches on how you, as future managers, need to explore the current and future impact and direction of these technologies. Multi-user diversity fundamentally changed how we think about scheduling in cellular systems.
Okay, that sounds incredibly efficient from a system perspective. But if you're always picking the best user, the one with the strongest signal right now, what happens to the user who's maybe stuck in a bad spot or just consistently has a weaker channel? Won't they get starved of service? That feels like a major fairness issue, which is definitely a business-critical concern.
That's a critical point, and you're absolutely right. Pure opportunistic scheduling, always picking the user with the instantaneously highest possible data rate, maximizes total throughput, but is inherently unfair. Users with persistently poor channels might experience huge delays or effectively get locked out. This is where fair scheduling algorithms become essential. A prime example, mentioned in the context of systems like IS-856 EVDO, is the proportional fair scheduler. This is a really clever, practical algorithm designed specifically to strike a balance between harvesting those multi-user diversity gains and maintaining fairness among users, ensuring everyone gets acceptable service over time.
Okay, how does proportional fair work? How does it balance throughput and fairness?
It works by keeping track of the average data rate or throughput that each user has actually received over a recent time window. In each scheduling interval, say every few milliseconds, the base station gets information from all active users about the data rate they could currently achieve given their present channel conditions, their requested rate. Now, the scheduler doesn't just pick the user with the absolute highest requested rate. Instead, for each user, it calculates a ratio, their current requested rate divided by their average achieved rate. It then schedules the user for whom this ratio is the highest.
So it prioritizes users whose current channel is good relative to their own average.
Exactly. This means a user who normally have a poor channel but suddenly experiences a temporary improvement gets a high priority, ensuring they get served when conditions are good for them. Conversely, a user who always has a great channel won't necessarily hog all the resources if their current condition is only slightly better than their already high average. This approach cleverly ensures that everyone eventually gets a turn, particularly when their channel conditions improve, while still significantly leaning towards users who can provide the most data throughput at any given moment. It's a practical implementation that directly exemplifies configuring efficient network management for a given set of requirements, a key skill outcome for you. It's about optimizing the system while keeping individual user experience acceptable.
That is incredibly smart. So if we can dynamically pick the best user based on their channel conditions, can we also go a step further and dynamically try to make the channel itself better for a chosen user? This sounds like where something called opportunistic beamforming might come in.
Precisely. Opportunistic beamforming takes the multi-user diversity concept and adds another layer of sophistication by actively manipulating the transmitted signal using antenna arrays at the base station. Instead of just passively waiting for a user's channel to randomly become good, the system tries to induce good channel conditions more frequently and more dramatically. How? By using multiple transmit antennas, the base station can subtly adjust the phase and amplitude of the signal sent from each antenna. This allows it to create a directional beam of energy. In opportunistic beamforming, this beam is essentially swept randomly across the cell. When this randomly moving beam happens to align perfectly with the channel path to a particular user, that user suddenly experiences an exceptionally strong signal, much stronger than they would otherwise. It's like being momentarily illuminated by a powerful, focused spotlight.
So you're creating bigger peaks and valleys in the signal strength of users.
Exactly. You're artificially inducing large and fast channel fluctuations, even in environments that might otherwise experience relatively slow fading. This gives the scheduler, like the proportional fair scheduler, many more opportunities to find a user with a truly excellent channel condition at any given moment, allowing it to harness even more multi-user diversity gain.
And is there a benefit beyond just boosting the intended user? What about interference?
Yes. There's a fascinating dual benefit, particularly in modern, dense networks, where interference between cells is a major limitation. This is called opportunistic nulling. While the base station is actively beamforming toward its intended user in one cell, it can simultaneously use its antenna array to create nulls directions, where very little signal energy is transmitted specifically aimed towards major interferers, like nearby base stations, or even specific users in adjacent cells who might be suffering from or causing interference. This significantly reduces inter-cell interference, which is especially beneficial for those users located at the edge of a cell. Cell edge users typically suffer the most from interference from neighboring cells and tend to have the poorest performance. Opportunistic nulling helps address this common fairness problem. These advanced techniques represent sophisticated management of the shared airwaves, maximizing overall network efficiency and improving individual user experience. They directly impact design integration and the selection of effective communication solutions in modern wireless networks.
Okay, moving from multi-user techniques to the antennas themselves. MIMO. Multiple input, multiple output. This isn't just a buzzword anymore, is it? It feels like a fundamental shift in how we use the physical space around us for communication. We're talking about putting multiple antennas on everything now.
Absolutely. MIMO is arguably one of the most transformative advancements in the history of wireless communication. It fundamentally changes the game. It moves beyond just using multiple antennas for diversity to combat fading, and instead leverages the rich scattering multipath environment itself to dramatically increase data rates. The core concept behind MIMO's power is spatial multiplexing. By using multiple antennas at the transmitter and multiple antennas at the receiver, we can send multiple independent data streams simultaneously over the very same frequency band.
So not just one data pipe through the air, but potentially several parallel pipes in the same frequency chunk.
Exactly. Imagine having several invisible data pipelines running side by side between the transmitter and receiver, all using the same licensed spectrum. This allows for a drastic increase in spectral efficiency, sending much more data, more bits per second, within the same amount of bandwidth.
Hertz. That sounds almost too good to be true. How much can it actually increase capacity?
The theoretical capacity gains from MIMO are quite remarkable, especially in environments with lots of reflections and scattering, which used to be seen only as a problem. In such rich scattering environments, MIMO capacity can potentially scale linearly with the minimum number of transmit or receive antennas. So if you have 4 transmit and 4 receive antennas, you might ideally get up to 4 times the data rate compared to a single antenna system in the same bandwidth, especially at higher signal-to-noise ratios. This is often called the degrees of freedom gain. Even in less rich environments or at lower SNRs, MIMO provides significant benefits through improved diversity and beamforming gains, essentially focusing the signal energy more effectively.
Okay, so massive potential gains, but how do you actually manage sending and receiving these multiple overlapping streams? The receiver must need some serious processing power, right?
Yes, sophisticated transceiver architectures and signal processing are definitely required. Some key concepts include VBLAST, Vertical Bell Labs Layered Spacetime, was an influential early architecture. It involves sending independent data streams from each transmit antenna. The receiver, equipped with multiple antennas and knowledge of the channel between all transmit-receive antenna pairs, uses complex algorithms often involving successive interference cancellation to essentially peel apart or decode the overlapping streams one by one. On the uplink, from multiple users' phones to the base station with multiple antennas, MIMO enables space division multiple access, SDMA. The base station's multiple antennas can spatially separate the signals arriving from different users, allowing several users to transmit simultaneously in the same frequency band, effectively increasing the cell's capacity. The receiver uses techniques similar to VBLAST to separate the user signals. On the downlink, from the base station with multiple antennas to multiple users, each potentially with multiple antennas, things get even more interesting with techniques called pre-coding. If the base station has good information about the channel conditions to each user, it can pre-distort the signals it transmits in a very clever way. The goal is that after the signals travel through the air and interfere with each other, they arrive at each intended user's antennas in a way that makes them easy to decode, perhaps even canceling out interference from signals intended for other users. Advanced concepts like dirty paper coding show that, theoretically, interference known at the transmitter can be completely pre-compensated for.
Wow, so you're essentially cleaning up the interference before you even send the signal.
That's the idea behind advanced pre-coding, yes. It requires very accurate channel state information, CSI, at the transmitter, which can be challenging to obtain, especially in FDD systems where the uplink and downlink channels are different. But the potential gains are huge. MIMO in all its forms directly addresses crucial knowledge and skills outcomes from your course, including design integration, selecting appropriate wireless devices, and understanding the architecture of networks needed for optimal performance. It truly exemplifies the current and future impact of these technologies. It's what enables the gigabit per second speeds we're starting to see from Wi-Fi 67 and 5G 6G cellular.
This is all incredibly powerful technology. It's easy to get lost in the bits and bytes and the engineering marvels, but for business students, for future managers, it's not just about the technology itself, is it? It has to translate into strategic advantage, right?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. For you, these sophisticated wireless technologies, from basic diversity principles to advanced MIMO and multi-user scheduling, they aren't just fascinating engineering feats. They're fundamental tools that enable and shape strategic business decisions. The choices your organization makes regarding the deployment, configuration, and upgrading of wireless networks, which standard to adopt, which features to enable, whether to invest in single antenna solutions or advanced MIMO systems, when to upgrade. These will directly impact your organization's bottom line and competitive position. These decisions affect system capacity and scalability, Can your network infrastructure actually support the anticipated growth in users, devices, and data-hungry applications? Over-provisioning wastes capital. Under-provisioning leads to poor customer experience and lost opportunities. Understanding capacity limits and scaling options is crucial. Cost of deployment and maintenance. Newer, more advanced technologies often come with higher upfront equipment costs and potentially more complex network management and maintenance requirements. You need to rigorously weigh these costs against the expected benefits, improve performance, new revenue streams, operational efficiencies, and project the return on investment. Quality of service, QoS, and user experience. Will your customers, employees, or partners get the reliable, low-latency, high-speed connections they expect and increasingly demand? Techniques like diversity, fair scheduling, and interference management directly improve reliability and perceived quality, which translates directly to customer satisfaction, employee productivity, and brand loyalty. Security and reliability. A deep understanding of how wireless signals propagate, where vulnerabilities lie, and how techniques like diversity enhance robustness is paramount. This knowledge underpins effective security policies and ensures the reliability of critical business communications. Furthermore, having a solid grasp of channel characteristics of various forms of interference fading models and the theoretical limits imposed by channel capacity enables you to perform much more accurate and insightful risk assessment for your data communication networks. This allows you to develop truly robust mitigation strategies, ensuring business continuity, data integrity, and compliance. This is absolutely core to the skill of formulating a risk assessment and develop an appropriate security strategy to mitigate risks for a given set of requirements. You can't secure what you don't understand.
And beyond just solving today's problems or managing current risks, this depth of knowledge really feels like it's about preparing for future leadership roles, for actually shaping what comes next and how businesses operate and compete using connectivity.
It absolutely is. That's a key goal. The curriculum you're engaging with here at the Dr. Sam Pack College of Business, and specifically in courses like BCIS 1347 Data Communications, is meticulously designed not just for academic understanding, but to prepare you for industry-standard network certification exams, the CompTIA Network plus MES, for example. But passing an exam isn't the end goal. It's about providing you with a solid, practical, and forward-looking foundation for your entire career. Mastering these concepts, understanding the terminology, the hardware, the software, the protocols, and the managerial issues isn't merely about learning technical specifications. It's about positioning yourself as a future business leader who understands how to leverage technology strategically for competitive advantage. You'll gain the ability to critically evaluate those alternatives available in hardware, software, and transmission facilities, to participate intelligently in the design, integration, selection, and implementation of communication solutions, and crucially, to explore the current and future impact and direction of these technologies. This holistic understanding empowers you to make informed, strategic decisions that can drive innovation, efficiency, and success in our perpetually connected, rapidly evolving digital world.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a truly deep dive into the hidden, complex, but incredibly vital world of wireless connections. From that invisible dance of electromagnetic waves and the challenges of fading, all the way to the strategic genius behind things like multi-user diversity and MIMO. We've really seen how every packet, every signal plays such a critical role in keeping our modern world connected.
We really covered a lot of ground. We explored those fundamental challenges of the wireless channel fading, interference, noise, and then looked at the ingenious techniques engineers have developed to overcome them. Diversity in all its forms, sophisticated multiple access schemes like CDMA and OFDM that allows so many users to share the airwaves. We also delved into how cellular networks manage this complexity for countless users and touched on the cutting-edge strategies, including multi-user diversity and advanced MIMO architectures that are pushing the boundaries of efficiency and capacity ever further. And the key point, as we emphasize, is that these aren't just abstract technical details. They are the absolute bedrock for managing risk, enabling innovation, and succeeding in today's digital economy.
Yeah. So the next time your smartphone, your laptop, your smartwatch, whatever it is, seamlessly connects to the internet, maybe take a second to remember that intricate, invisible dance of data communications happening constantly all around you. It's a dance that's been carefully and very cleverly choreographed over decades to deliver the reliable, high-speed connections we now almost take for granted. And if you've gained some new insights today, if we've maybe demystified some of this wireless magic for you, please do us that favor. Like this deep dive, subscribe to our channel for more, and definitely share it with colleagues or friends who are looking for that, maybe that unfair advantage in understanding our complex technological landscape. And please don't forget, all those valuable extra resources, links, and further reading, they're always linked for you right there in the description below.
And as you move forward from here, maybe carrying these ideas into your other courses or your career, consider this question. How will the relentless, continuous evolution of wireless technology, things like 6G, satellite internet constellations, maybe things we haven't even conceived of yet, how will that shape the next generation of business models, products, and services? And, more importantly, what role will you play in designing, implementing, and managing those connections? Remember, strong connections aren't just technical, they're strategic. Until next time, keep your packets clean and your networks resilient.